Hello there.
Hello.
Hello, hello. How are you?
Can't hear you.
Can you hear me or no?
Volume is up. Are you muted?
No? Can you hear me?
That's weird.
The sound's not coming through?
Let me go to sound.
Let's see. One second.
How about now?
Can you hear me now? Hello, 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 hello. I'm going to go out and come back in. 1 second.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
I can very barely hear you right now.
Oh, you can hear me. Okay. Wait, let me see this. How is that? Is that better?
I think it's on my end. Let me go into Zoom settings.
Okay, great. I'm going to mute
I
myself.
don't know why it's... All right. Try again.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Now I'm going to put you to the TV. How about now?
Maybe the TV volume also. Maybe the TV volume also.
Well, now you're just breaking up.
About the duvets.
I'm going to try.
Single and twin different here? I think so. So if says single. You want it, if it says single, twin will be okay also. Either way, it should be fine. But I just need to, in my jacket pocket, there's 2 keys on there. There's the fob for the car, which you don't need to do anything with it, just have it on you. And then attached to that is a little sheep. That's the house key for that back door. Okay. All right. I'll see you both in a little bit. Hi, everybody. Hello. So good to see you all. Hi. Wow. And you can hear me okay, Dayananda?
Yep.
Okay, good. Good. Wow. I miss you all so much. I miss you all so much. And I'm happy to say I will be back in just 3 short weeks. Not even. I think at this point it's more like 2.5. So time is just flying by. And I'm looking forward to coming home and being in that beautiful space at the ashram once again. So let's sit tall and we'll close the eyes and take a few moments just to settle ourselves. Allow the feet to be situated on the floor in such a way that it brings stability and foundation. And from that beautiful foundation, allow the energy of yourself to be uplifted, almost as if you were this beautiful rose bush growing up and out, recognizing the importance of the root, the importance of that which grounds you, but also recognizing the importance of that which frees you to come into your fullest possible expression. So let each inhale be grounding, let each exhale be freeing. Let each inhale root you down, and let each exhale lift you up. Let each breath be a complete expression of life, of potential, and of knowledge of the self. And then drawing the hands together in front of the heart, chant the invocatory mantras, taking a breath in for Om. Om. Shri Guru Bhyo Namaha. Hari Om. Ganana Antva Ganapati Gum Hava Mahe Kavin Kavinam Upamashravastamam Jestarajam Brahmanan Brahmanaspata Anafshrinvanuti Bisidha Sadhanam Mahaganapataye Namaha. Prano Devi Saraswati Vaje Purvajini Vati Dhina Mavitriyavatu Ano Divo Brahataf Parvata Da Saraswati Ajata Gantu Yagnyam Havan Devi Jujoshana Gritachi Shagman Novacha Mushati Shrinotu Vagdevyai Namaha. and gently releasing the hands down and fluttering the eyes open. And so today we continue our conversation on the Bhagavad Gita, bringing us to chapter 7. And this text, I can never emphasize enough. And sometimes I feel like I try to emphasize too hard the importance of this text. It really is a guide, a kind of a handbook to living life in such a way that it brings meaning to every moment, that it brings relief to our sorrow and upliftedness to our joy. This text, this beautiful scripture, this conversation between Arjuna and Krishna, it tells us what to expect in our human existence, and what to expect as a result of spiritual practices. It also tells us what not to expect. It explains to us how to be practical, how to be reasonable, how to express and experience potential. And also it tells us how not to get caught in the slippery slopes that are associated with unhealthy egoism. So this text really is more than just something that we learn to recite, or just something that we read and say, oh, it's just another scripture. It really is a guide, an absolute guide, day to day. Start every day, open up and read one verse and let that guide you throughout your day as an inquiry. And I guarantee you, in a short amount of time, your life will take on a bit of a different meaning, and express a bit of a different potential, maybe one that you weren't even expecting. So chapter 7, as all the chapters, covers a lot of different topics. But I think what I'm going to focus on today is the difference between piety and impiety. So the difference between people. And when we talk about people, we're not here to like talk poorly about other people. We're saying, what are the behaviors that allow me to realize my own pious nature, versus that bring and increase the excruciating suffering of my humanness, through impiety, through those behaviors that are not of a pure nature, or even moving in that direction. When we talk about purity in yoga, it's very important to know that we're not talking about an extreme type of purity, because each and every one of us are human, and we're going to practice different practices to varying degrees. Some of you will quit smoking immediately, as soon as you put your mind to it. Others of you will quit slowly, gradually over time. Others of you will never even attempt to quit smoking. Some of you will quit cursing, and you'll stop swearing immediately as soon as you set your mind to it. Others of you will just cut out the F-bomb and keep the rest around, just in case. Some of you won't even try. Some of you will quit drinking just like that, alcohol. Some of you, you'll moderate your alcohol consumption, and others of you won't even try. And the only difference between those three people, the only difference is where they're setting their intention. It's not that the person who quits immediately is better or worse than the person who doesn't even quit. It's really in the perception of the individual, because the person who quits immediately might actually end up drinking again next week, because their intention didn't have a foundation, didn't have some place to set down roots. So they just thought, well, this sounds like a great idea, so let me give it a shot. They didn't prepare themselves. They didn't investigate or inquire what would happen as they attempted to cut alcohol out from, their day-to-day consumption patterns. And so they might not be set up in order, to have success in that endeavor. And then they fall back a week later, 2 weeks later, a month later, and they feel poorly about themselves. So we can't say that the person who is quick to jump into the fire is actually a better person. No, that's not true, because it really is an individual experience how much we attach or release from things in this life. It's a very individualized experience. And how we experience that has a lot to do with the level of inquiry that we bring ourselves to, and the amount of patience that we're willing to show ourselves. I suppose one difference between the person who attempts to quit automatically and the person who doesn't try at all, one difference could be that the person who doesn't see any point in even trying is suffering from apathy, right? Has anybody in here ever suffered from apathy? Show of hands? Yeah. So that would be one difference between those two people, is that one, on the one hand, wants so bad to stop drinking that they jump into the fire. And the other one has no preference, not because it's healthy, a healthy detachment, but because it's an apathetic detachment and they don't see any point in even trying. So that would be one. And again, that's very individual. It's a very individual experience. So when we talk about piety, when we talk about pious people, yes, we're talking about behavioral patterns in general that we see throughout the human species, but we're also particularly trying to understand our own human experience. You know, what parts of our behavior are a bit more pious than others? What parts of our behavior are more well thought out? What parts of our behavior truly contain the seed of spiritual inquiry versus the costume that we sometimes wear, trying to appear to be the thing, rather than actually embodying the essence of that. So in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna starts off by explaining to Arjuna that a devotee will have pious tendencies. A true devotee will have pious tendencies, because a true devotee cannot go through a day, an hour, and maybe even, depending the level of devotion, a moment or a minute, without thinking about, how does this connect me with God? And of course, the Bhagavad Gita is Krishna focused. So in the Bhagavad Gita, you're going to hear Krishna, Krishna, Krishna. But really, this is true of any lineage with any avatar of divinity. A Chpt cannot go through a day, an hour, and maybe even minute to minute without thinking about the Divine Mother. A Shivite, same way. A Christian, same way. They cannot go a day, an hour, or a minute without thinking about Christ, without thinking about their connection to that divinity and how their life can be the means for deepening that connection. So the first thing that Krishna explains to Arjuna is that devotees do tend to have a more pious heart because they're driven by that divine connection, because God is what is fueling them, and their longing to know God is what is fueling them. So that individual who is being called and who is listening to the call and making whatever attempts they're making to answer the call to that divine connection, that individual is less likely to behave in ways that will hinder their relationship with divinity. They're not entirely unlikely to behave in those ways. They're just they're a little less likely. So they're less likely to expend their energy as much in directions that are a waste of energy or that are harmful to themselves or others, because as devotees, one would assume that they are studying, that they're practicing, that they're spending time with a teacher, and that they're understanding the consequences of karma. They're understanding the consequences that their own behavior carries. And so they're paying mind. They're watching their own behavior. They're watching the way that they're walking through the world. And they are committing themselves to both tapas and swadhyaya. Tapas being the compassionate discipline, keeping oneself aligned with one's practice and inquiry, and then swadhyaya, that self-study, The self-study, which asks us to see ourselves in the light of the scripture that we study, to see ourselves in the light of the Bhagavad Gita or the Devi Mahatmya, to see ourselves in the light of the Bible, and not in the messages that humans bring forward in their own fallible ways, but in the actual messages. And if you look at these texts, no matter what tradition they come from, there's similar messages throughout. Love all, harm none. Unity is the greatest truth. An unhealthy ego will increase your suffering. Poor behavior will increase your suffering. And because we know poor behavior will increase your suffering, then they also teach that, good behavior or positive behavior or pure behavior will reduce your suffering. So these are just some of the lessons that go through traditions that are very much similar to one another. And so the individual who is a pious student, a pious learner, a devotee, that student is going to take those teachings a bit more to heart, perhaps. And it's not because they're jumping into a fire. It's because they're taking the time to sit with the teachings, to learn, to inquire, to ask questions about what they don't understand, to try it on for size, to reflect, and then to try again. One of the things that we often see, and Dayananda will be able to support me in this, I'm certain of it, when a lot of times when we have students come in for YTT, and Michelle is in the room too, she'll be able to substantiate this. Every YTT, we get at least one student, if not a few, who come up and they say, now I'm in the yoga teacher training program, I'm going vegan. And just yesterday, they were a meat eater, right? And now, because they're at the ashram and because, they're in a yoga teacher training, they're going to jump into the fire of veganism. And, hey, I'm all for the whole world being vegan. However, there is a proper way to do it and there is an improper way to do it. And when we jump into the fire of veganism, it's not going to last very long because our physical body and our mind are going to have reactions to that because we haven't prepared ourselves to understand, where's my protein going to come from? How am I going to feel in my body as I stop eating meat? Am I going to feel sick? Am I going to feel nauseous? Am I going to feel tired? What is the condition of this physical body? And is there anything that I'm cutting out that actually I might need? So students don't have a tendency to think that when they come in sometimes to like the yoga teacher training, and then they want to take a vow of veganism. And so I often tell them, if not always, say, don't do that right now, please. While you're staying at the ashram, you're going to be eating vegan anyway, because that's what we serve here with very little exception, a little bit of honey here and there or something along those lines. But don't tell yourself, I'm jumping into the hot, into the fire of veganism as of right now, because you're only giving yourself one more thing to worry about on top of an immersive yoga teacher training experience. In other words, you're harming yourself. It's not the approach it's not a practical approach. It's not a healthy approach. There's more background that has to happen, more inquiry that has to happen. So hopefully that makes some sense for everybody. Yes? Okay. So devotees have perhaps you have to take everything with a grain of salt, right? Because, people are really diverse. But a sincere devotee will have a tendency toward pious behavior. An individual who does not have faith may have, there's always exceptions, a tendency a little bit more toward impious behavior. And why is that? Well, according to the teachings, it's because there is not an adherence to Dharma. There's not an adherence to the teachings, to the virtues that are espoused by a tradition. And unless an individual is a very special individual who has an innate understanding of the power of love and the power of compassion and the power of unity, then they will inevitably give in a little bit more to their opposites. Because traditions at their best, when they're at their best, teach the power of love, teach the power of unity and the power of compassion and kindness, the power of sincerity and faith, the power of honesty. These traditions become very important because they teach us. But when an individual rather, is not learning these things, either through schooling or from a spiritual teacher or from the company that they're keeping, then what is it that they're learning? There's an old saying, the one who hangs out with thieves becomes a thief. The one who hangs out with those who commit improper conduct tend to mimic that improper conduct to some degree, unless they have something that's compelling them to do otherwise. And according to Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, faith and devotion are those compelling, is the compelling other that would draw you away from harmful behaviors and toward healthier behaviors. Krishna goes on to tell Arjuna in this chapter that pious individuals, like truly pious individuals, great souls, as he calls them, are actually really rare. And so this is where we can just stop right now feeling badly about ourselves, because each and every one of us, all of us, have our struggles. All of us have our challenges. We have our successes, and we have our struggles. Every single one of us. And so we're all right about even in that regard, you know? And your struggle may look a little different than mine or than the person sitting next to you, but you are struggling in some way, shape, or form. We all are. This is completely normal for human beings. And so we shouldn't look at that and say, oh, I guess then I'm a bad person. No, because the struggle is part of your spiritual path. But Krishna does tell Arjuna, he says, so the reality, though, is that a great soul, or a truly, truly pious soul, few and far between, because of the amount of discipline it requires, because of the amount of faith and surrender that is required for an individual to be truly pious, to be truly altruistic, to be truly with self-knowledge. The individual, and when I say individual, I'm thinking of people like Thich Nhat Hanh or Sri Amma or any of the living saints or the saints of the past. These individuals, Krishna said, they share, you know, and he's of course talking about the great beings in his time when he was embodied. But these individuals that we can look at as saints or as pious people, truly pious people, they, according to Krishna, have certain shared understandings. The first one is that divinity itself, God itself, is the cause of all causes, is the source of all that is, that there is nothing that does not come from that, and that everything that comes from that is part of that, and that there is no doubt, none whatsoever. In a conversation that you have with a classmate or with a friend, you may say, well, so God brings forth everything. God is the source of everything, and everything is part of God. And then you think about it a little bit, and then a doubt comes in your mind, and you say, yeah, but what about that really mean person who lives down the street, who curses at the kids riding their bike past the house all the time? That person really can't be part of God, right? So in our humanness and in our human fallibility, we doubt, whereas a truly pious person will not doubt. They will be very consistent in their faith that everything is God and God is everything, and there is no exception to that whatsoever. He says a great soul also understands that this life, this entire life is spiritual. This entire life is sacred. This entire life is full of sacred activities, no matter what the activity is. So there's a really wonderful story. Let's see if I can remember how it starts now. There are two students at an ashram, and all the students at an ashram are given tasks to do. They're given things to take care of. And these two are given the task of carrying the water sacks down to the local river and bringing water back. And this is very heavy. These are big sacks. They have the bar going across the back of the shoulders, and they have to carry these up a hill, when they're full. And it's very tiring. It's very, very heavy work. And so the first student comes up, and he puts the sacks down that are full of water. And he's like, oh my God, that's it. I'm not doing this. This is ridiculous. This is absolutely the most horrible task that anybody could be given in this ashram. It's a sin that any student should be asked to work this hard. And so the person who was in charge of receiving the water from him, accommodated his feelings of distress and excused him. The second student came up and put the water down and looked at the person in charge of receiving the water and said, how much more do you need? How much more do you need? I will bring as many trips as I have to. The difference between these two people is that the first one does not understand that the journey up the hill, that the journey of the struggle is just as important as the journey filled with ease. The second student understands that every step matters, no matter whether it is easeful or full of suffering and challenge. So this perhaps is one of our greatest challenges, is to look at our life and to move beyond thinking that there is one part of our life that is more sacred than another. I'll just use musicians as an example, because it's coming to the front of my mind. Oftentimes, musicians, they cannot wait to be on stage. They cannot wait to be in that moment of expressing their creativity to the audience, to the people who will hear them. And that's a beautiful thing. And having had a little bit of that background myself, I completely understand it. But equally sacred to the performance of one's gifts for the sake of others bearing witness to them is the quiet solitude where one has the opportunity to truly sit in the midst of that gift and allow it to be expressed privately. So Dayananda, you're songwriting, correct? You do some songwriting? Mm-hmm. And you might do some songwriting with your bandmates, but you do some by yourself too, right? And would you agree that the time spent quietly, alone, songwriting, expressing words, figuring out connections is as sacred as the moment spent on stage singing them out to a crowd? Absolutely. Absolutely. So look at your life and just ask yourself a very simple question. Where is it that I am calling this life absolutely sacred? And where is it that I'm not? And ask yourself why there's a difference there. Because yeah, it's really wonderful when you go through the Starbucks line and they give you a free coffee because they've made a mistake for the person in front of you. And you call, maybe that's a blessing, right? Maybe it's, today is great because I got a free Frappuccino or something like that. But equally blessed is the person in front of you who did not get the right drink, right? The mistake that was made there, do you think that they were happy about it? Or do you think that they were irritated because they had to wait, not even giving it a thought that, that there wouldn't be waste, that drink would be gifted to somebody, would be given to somebody, would put a smile on someone's face. So the next time that you're in line at Starbucks or anywhere for that fact, and they make a mistake on your order, keep in the back of your mind, a mistake on my order means that the next person might receive some small benefit. Be grateful for that benefit. And then the mistake won't seem so harsh, won't seem so rough to you. It won't be able to be abrasive to your happiness in the way that it typically is. Does that make sense to everybody? Yeah. He goes on to say that, these pious individuals understand that the material world, and by material world, we mean the world that is created via the human mind and imagination, that the material world is a reflection of the spiritual world, but it's like a circus mirror. You ever go in front of the circus mirror that makes you like 10 feet tall and like this thin, or that makes you like, a foot tall and like, wider than wide? That's what the world is like. The world is like a circus mirror. And it does reflect spirituality, but it's contorted. It's contorted because we get ourselves all wrapped up in the mental idea that, well, if I'm doing well on my spiritual path, it means everything's going to be going smoothly. Everything's going to go easily. Everything is going to be lined up because it'll show me that I'm doing the right thing. But actually what ends up happening oftentimes is that as we dive in to our spiritual practices, no matter how long we've been practicing, so whether you're practicing a month or a year or 20 years or 40 years, sorrow is going to be there to greet you along the way, and so is happiness. We will never relinquish completely the sorrow of our humanness. It's built in to this experience of embodiment. What we do learn is how to navigate it more healthfully, is how to meet it in terms of compassion. Instead of cursing our suffering, we actively seek to heal it. Instead of being angry at an impersonal God who's not answering our prayers, we begin to recognize that prayers are always answered to some degree. It's just that sometimes they're answered in a way we weren't expecting. We look at life, the more that we practice, and understand that our reaction to this world, our reaction to this human experience is very limited when the ego is extremely unhealthy or even just a little bit unhealthy. And the more that we dedicate ourselves to the spiritual practice of unity and compassion and nonviolence, the clearer the picture becomes, although it will still be obscured to some degree, except in the hearts and minds of the great, great souls who they themselves walk with clarity, with understanding, with knowledge beyond understanding. But in that moment, though, I do just have to say this, that it's really important that we understand that even the great souls are human. Just because they were pious and they were or are saintly and knowledgeable in a way that is very difficult to explain or perceive, it doesn't mean that they're without their human fallibility. And just as an example of that, look at Christ on the cross when he yelled out to his Father and he said, "Father, why do you forsake me? Why do you forsake me?" His Father didn't forsake him. Human beings forsaked him. So even the radiance of Jesus had this moment of human fallibility. Even though he was a great soul embodied, he still was susceptible to the workings of the human mind and the frailty of the human ego. He goes on to say that the great souls, the pious souls, that they surrender to full knowledge, that they're not happy with just a half a truth, that they might get a little relief from a half truth, that they might get a little bit of information, a little bit of wisdom, but that's not enough. They surrender in full knowledge, not in partial. They keep going. They say, this is not the place to stop. This is not the place to become satisfied. There's more. So I'm going to continue until there's nothing more to continue. And then he finally says to Arjuna that a great soul is an individual who is sure to attain union with divinity, is sure to. And when we ask ourselves, why is it that a pious individual, a saintly individual, why are they certain to attain unity or God consciousness? And really, when I think about this, there's a lot of little reasons that we could list out. But the one primary reason is because they no longer doubt. They no longer doubt. They don't go through their day feeling, oh, everything is going really well today. Today is a good day for me to get on my yoga mat, to get on my meditation cushion. This feels good. And then tomorrow it's raining and miserable, and the water pipe breaks, and the dog poops in the house. And suddenly it's like, this is not a good day to get on my meditation cushion. This is not a good day to get on my yoga mat. This is just not a good day. Doubt infects the heart. It infects the mind. And so those individuals who are called great souls, who are called the pious ones, the doubt has been removed. They see no difference between the sunshine day and the cloudy, rainy day. They see no difference between things going smoothly and things being chaotic, because they understand that the nature of the human-made world and the nature of the natural world is changeability, that things change like that. So why become attached to things being a particular way? So what if it rains in 2 minutes from now? It'll just stop again, only to start again, only to stop again. So don't attach yourself to the starting and the stopping. Instead, attach yourself to something. If you're going to attach yourself to something that has benefit to you, that has real benefit. And what is real benefit but that which alleviates your suffering? So attach yourself to your yoga practice. Just be mindful that the attachment you feel toward your yoga practice is not one of avoidance of life, but it is actually a gateway to the freedom to live your life, to love more fully, to be present more completely, to live more honestly, to stop making an enemy out of everybody else, to stop making an enemy out of yourself. So Krishna goes on. I have so much, right? In this chapter, there's so much in every chapter. It's just an amazing text, such an amazing text. Krishna goes on and to explain to Arjuna that there's 4 types of people who surrender to Krishna. 4 types of people. There's the distressed individual. So the distressed individual who surrenders to Krishna is the individual who's sick and tired. This is the individual who sees no other option and who is just like, there's nothing else for me to do, so this is what I'm going to do. They're distressed and they're looking for some type of salvation from that disturbance. The second type of person who will surrender to Krishna, and here we can say that Krishna is the name that represents all aspects of divinity, not just one, but all. So it is a universal name for God. The second is the one who desires wealth. And this individual is very interesting. They surrender to Krishna because they think that Krishna can give them something, And there's a really wonderful story of a man who's at the beach with his child, and the child is playing in the water, and the undertow is very strong. And so and he fits both 1 and 2. So he fits both the distressed and he fits the one who is desirous of wealth. The undertow pulls the son out into deeper water, and the son doesn't know how to swim very well, and so he starts to drown. And the father tries to go out into the water to save the child, but he also is having trouble. Now the son is drowning and he himself is drowning. And he starts calling out to Krishna, and he says, please, let me save my son. Let my son live. Don't let him die. Don't let me die. And I promise you, if you give us the wealth of life, the ability to live on, I will be a devotee like you have never seen. I will come to temple every day. I will make my offerings. I will dedicate my life to you. I will sing your praises morning, noon, and night. I will do this. I surrender to you in this moment. All I ask of you is save my child and save my life. So number 1, he's distressed, right? Because he's in this perception of life versus death. And number 2, he's looking for the wealth of being alive. So Krishna answers. He takes a hold of the child and the man, pulls him back to shore. And initially the man is like, Krishna, 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 for at least 24 hours. It's all he can think of is how grateful he is to Krishna. And he's going to go to the temple the next morning with fresh fruits and flowers, and he's going to adorn, the murti of Krishna, and he's going to sing his praises and let everyone know. And the next morning comes and he wakes up and he's got a little bit of a headache, probably from all the stress of the day before. And he says to Krishna in a prayer, he says, Krishna, I am so grateful to you, but you don't mind if I start tomorrow, do you? I didn't think so. I'll be there first thing tomorrow morning, I promise. That day goes by, and he's still telling everybody now how he prayed to Krishna and Krishna saved him and his son. And of course, he's a good swimmer too, and of course, he had a role to play in pulling his son out of the water. And he goes home and he goes to sleep, and he wakes up the next morning and he's all tired, probably because he's been talking so much. And he says to Krishna, I think I'm going to start on Sunday because everybody goes to temple on Sunday. So Sunday I'll go and I'll bring extra fruit and extra flowers, and I will sing your praises. And Sunday comes and goes, and the next Sunday comes and goes. And so individuals who fall into this category need to be very careful that they're not making promises that they are not able or willing to keep. And that if we're distressed, we're understanding that, yes, the grace of divinity can provide us with relief, but there is an amount of personal work that has to be done by these hands, in this mind, through this heart, that is not going to be done by Krishna or Ganesh or any aspect of divinity. Ganesha is not going to just remove the obstacles for me. In a moment, he may awaken within me the ability to remove them myself. And that's his grace. But if I look at Ganesha and expect him to do the work for me, if I look at Krishna and expect him to do the work for me, I'm going to be very disappointed, because it will just show that I have little understanding of the complexities of this life, of the necessity of personal work, and also the necessity of tying that personal work into an acknowledgement that I only have a right to the work, not to the outcome. I only have a right to the work and not to the outcome, which we talked about either last week or the week before. The third type is the inquisitive student, the curious one. So this person surrenders to Krishna or to any aspect that he named because they want to know, because they feel like there's questions that can be answered and they want to have answers. And so they go and they're curious, and they may stay for a long time or they may stay for a short time. It just really depends. Again, each one of these individuals, the individual who is distressed may turn into the most, transform into the most profound devotee. and stay in that grace for the rest of their living days. Whereas another stressed individual may only stay for a short period of time and then move on to the next distraction. And it's the same thing here. The curious individual comes and says, what answers can you give me? What answers can you provide for me to these questions? And then once they get the answers or some semblance of an answer, perhaps they're satisfied and they head off into another direction, thinking that they know it all now. Or they stay because they know that this is only the surface and that, you know, like an iceberg, this much is above the water and what's below the water can't even, it's so huge in comparison. So if you want to know the deeper teachings, then you have to stay and investigate what lies beneath the surface. And then the fourth one, which is called the Jnani. And this is the individual who is truly searching for knowledge. So they're not just curious, they have a calling, they have a longing, they want the truth of themselves. They long to know who they really are. And not only who they really are, but who you really are. They want to know the deeper truth. And they're called to that in this life. And so they will sit with teachers and they will study the scriptures and they will stay focused on their studies. They will live to the best of their ability in a more pious manner. I know the word pious to some people can be a real turnoff also, by the way. 25, 30 years ago, I would have been one of those people where like, don't talk to me about piety, you know? But I've come since then to understand it to be something different than what I was initially taught in my early schooling days. Having been a student in a Catholic school where piety meant that as a girl, you shut up and listen, that you don't speak unless you're spoken to, that piety was obeying. But here, piety is not obeying blindly. Piety is knowing the difference and abiding in that knowledge, in that wisdom. That if I was going to sit here and talk about you and say something hurtful, that would be incorrect. And therefore, I would not do it. An individual who is distressed or desirous of some wealth will have an excuse. They'll say, well, it might not be right to say something like this, but I will say it anyway because I have something to gain for it. And an individual who is the inquisitor, who is the one who is curious, they'll say to themselves, well, I feel this upsettedness toward this person, or I have this impulse to say something negative about this person. Why do I want to say that? What is it that I have to gain? What is it that I have to lose? So they'll do the inquiry, right? So the Jnani will not say it because they know it is incorrect, and they probably aren't even called to say it anyway. The curious one will do a psychological investigation of their own ego and be like, why do I want to behave in this way? Why do I want to say these things? What other options do I have? The individual who desires wealth or who is distressed may very well acknowledge that it is an unkind, incorrect behavior, but they will take part in it anyway, most likely, because the ego has talked them into believing that there's something there for them to gain. Does that make sense? Yeah. So let's just take a pause there and say, any questions? There's so much more to cover from this chapter. We're definitely not going to get to it all today. But are there any questions from anybody? Did I see Amber's hand up? Yeah. I can't hear though, so you have to unmute. Any questions or reflections yet? Are we good? No questions? No reflection? So you all got it, right?
So many questions, so many reflections.
There are so many questions. And, I think that the most difficult thing about teaching about the Bhagavad Gita, or any other spiritual text for that fact, is not diminishing its fullness. Yes, there are typically 4 types of people who surrender to Krishna, but here's the key. You are all 4 types of people. It depends on the moment. In some moments, you're distressed. In some moments, you're seeking wealth. In some moments, you're curious. And in other moments, you're truly pious. You have all of that within you. You don't have to choose just one. But if you wish to see a reduction of suffering in this life, if you wish to see that your life becomes a place of greater harmony within, greater peace within, then continue to move toward the jnani, toward the individual who seeks knowledge alone, and heal the aspects of the self that are attached to the first 3. It's good to be curious. So don't stop being curious. And as a matter of fact, as we've talked about many times, this tradition is based in questions and answers. This tradition does not want you to be blind or to follow blindly. It wants you to ask. It wants you to investigate, to explore. So curiosity is a good thing, as long as it's not the kind of curiosity that leads you over here and then over here and then over here, more of a distraction, right? The kind where, oh, look, shiny new thing over there. No, not that. Conduct an inquiry, be curious, stay with it for a little while, and see what happens as you start to uncover the different layers and levels of the wisdom that you are inquiring about. With regard to the distressed individual, distressed is just a really complicated condition of every human being, because we're all distressed over something or another. The question is, what is the relationship that we have to that distress? Are we looking at that distress hopelessly, giving it all of our energy and reducing our faith in any goodness? Are we giving up? Or are we looking at the distress that we feel in this life, the distress that we experience in this life, and seeing it as a springboard, as a diving off point where, okay, there's distress happening right now. Absolutely. Maybe there's a loss of a loved one, or a loss of a job, or something went awry that you weren't expecting in life. This is a moment in life where there's so much opportunity to investigate yourself. How compassionate can you be with the pain that you feel? Not only towards yourself, like, oh, poor baby for hurting. No. How compassionate can you be to your pain? Can you cradle your pain? Can you love your pain? Can you hold a space for your pain? Can you welcome it? Can you see it as sacred? Can you offer it an opportunity to be included in your experience as a human being and not discounted? So often I hear people say things like, oh, I'm working to get rid of my anger. I'm sorry, you're going to be so disappointed because you are not going to get rid of that anger. You can't get rid of it. It doesn't go anywhere. It changes. You don't get rid of your anger. You change your relationship to it. You give it an opportunity, and you give yourself an opportunity to evolve. And then you don't have to get rid of anything. Then you recognize that this too shall change. So I don't have to be so attached to it. I don't have to be attached to my anger. I don't have to be attached to hate. I don't even have to be attached to peace. I don't have to be attached to anything. The only thing, as Swami Satchidananda would say, actually, I'll take that last one back. Swami Satchidananda said, if you're going to be attached to anything at all, let it be to your peace. And let that guide you so that you feel more and more peace day in and day out, moment after moment, minute after minute, day after day, year after year. Live your life in such a way that peace becomes your primary goal, inner peace and outer peace. And then the rest will take care of itself. But you will not know peace if you keep trying to shove your anger under the rug. You will not know peace if you continually talk poorly about people. You will not know peace if you are continually greedy. You will not know peace if you continually hate yourself. You will not know peace if you continually harm yourself or others. Instead, you'll know the repercussions of those actions. So behave in a way that does not bring about the burden of guilt or grief or resentment over actions taken. And instead, inquire, what in my life is conducive to peace? What in my life is conducive to wisdom? What in my life will carry me toward piety and away from violence? Okay, I have so much more, but we'll have to have part 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 also. So any questions or reflections right now? Dayananda, what do you have to say?
I got nothing.
You always have something to say, and always something very wise too, I might add. All right, let's sit nice and tall. Close the eyes. Take a breath in and a breath out. And draw the hands together in front of the heart. And we'll chant one Om followed by the All Beings mantra. Om. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Guru Bhyo Namaha. Hari Om. Thank you all so much for being here today. It's so wonderful to see each and every one of you. I'm so glad that you're all there together, and I look forward to being there in person again very soon. My heart is always there, though. And just as a little reminder, I don't usually do any kind of announcements or anything like that, but there are 2 that are pretty powerful right about now. Some of you may be interested to know. We are going to India in October. We're going from October 5th to the 14th, and we still have a couple of seats left. So I wasn't expecting such a response to this, but there is a huge response. And I think we have 4 seats left, if I'm not mistaken. So if you're interested in going to India with Sangha, then go onto the website, take a look, and contact Casey about your deposits and whatnot, and getting all the information that you need. And then the second one is that keep your eyes open, because there will be announced fairly soon another retreat away on the schedule, this time to Ireland, to the meditation facility that we're opening up here. And so we will be having our inaugural retreat here, either in July or August of this year. And so looking forward to sharing that with those of you who are so called as well. So just a little something to carry forward with you as you go through today. Wonderful. Thank you all so much again. Enjoy your brunch. Give lots of love to everybody in the kitchen. Lots of love to Michelle and to Dayananda for all the work they're doing this morning, and to DJ, who's over there doing all of his amazing work too. Love to all. Bye-bye.